Welcome to Liberty Legion, where sensibility rises above radicalism and liberty stands above all. Join us as we bring common sense back into the conversation for freedom and for the future. Now here's your host, Aaron.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Liberty Legion podcast. I am super excited today because I have an extremely exciting interview for you. We are sitting down with James and David of Colorado First Action in Colorado, and we're going to talk to them about what they're doing with the Douglas County School Board race specifically, which is school board races are a hot topic, I think, nationwide right now. And I want to give you guys some insight into how two young men got an organization off the ground, are using grassroots efforts and organizing to try to fight back against the radicalism in our schools, but also statewide. They're doing, Colorado First is doing more than just this school board race, but this is a contentious one. And a lot of people would say Douglas County sort of sets the tone nationwide. It's received nationwide attention over the last several years with their school board races. So I'm going to let you guys listen to James and David and tell the story from their side. So let's get into it. You guys are obviously two young men. Thank you for being in the fight, especially in somewhere as crazy as Colorado. I appreciate it. James, if you want to tell me kind of where the founding of this organization came from and what is your big why and why should people believe and join Colorado First Action?
Yeah, sure. So it kind of started right after the election last year when I saw that we underperformed the rest of the nation when it came to Republican turnout. And there's a red wave nationwide for President Trump, and that just didn't materialize here for whatever reason. And my personal view is that that didn't materialize because we don't have a lasting conservative infrastructure in the state of Colorado that can really fight back against the institutionalized liberal control that we have over our politics. For example, there's a billion different leftist NGOs, non-governmental organizations that get grants from the state government that lobby for different legislation. The GOP really doesn't have any of that. Conservatives and people that want to put America first in Colorado don't have any infrastructure. So we took it upon ourselves to get that started.
I love that because I think the biggest issue with most people I speak to just about grassroots efforts or wanting to get involved is they don't know where to start. And especially for conservatives in Colorado, you hit the nail on the head that it's important and vital if we're going to have an organized effort and an effective effort in pushing back against the radical blue wave here in Colorado, that they have a place to plug in. And it sounds like your organization intends to be that place.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Very cool. And so how did you guys decide to take on the Douglas County School Board races and really jump in to support those Republican candidates and preserve the Republican majority?
Well, I think it's really important, like you said when you started this is a highly contested race. A lot of money is being poured into this race. The teachers union just endorsed a liberal slate of candidates. And actually, Randy Weigarten's organization just dumped money into their elections as well. So this is a very, very highly contested race. And so we knew, and those that are working with us knew that it was really important that we start building this infrastructure in this area, that we get involved in this because it is one of the very few conservative majority school boards that are remaining in the state of Colorado. And one of the big issues, back to the teachers union, is they want to bring the teachers union back into the school district. They want to bring collective bargaining back. And if that happens, you're going to see horrible things happen to this school district. You're going to see teachers on strike, kids not being able to learn when that happens, and all those that comes when you have collective bargaining with these unions. So we understand the importance of this race and why, we felt it was important that we get involved.
100%. Some glaring examples I've seen and what worries me about having really heavy teachers union influence in our schools is we had the Charlie Kirk assassination and several educators, I believe Adams County especially, were celebrating his assassination and were told by the superintendent, well, there's nothing we can do. So there's, to me, a high level of protection for bad behavior when the teachers union gets in and infests our schools and our school boards. So I appreciate you bringing that up, and I completely agree. Is there anything you want to share about the launch of, the DCSD project, how you guys have been able to recruit and build this and hopefully garner or continue to garner engagement from the parents and the Douglas County community?
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking for volunteers every day for people that want to come out and canvass with us. Our goal is 20,000 doors for this race. We know that's a big goal to hit in less than 5 weeks, but we believe that we can hit it with more and more volunteers every day. We want moms, dads, students, anyone who's interested to come out and knock and support the Common Sense Slate because we understand how important it is. And also we understand that some people can't volunteer, they can't, go knock doors. We are offering phone banking as well. Those that want to call voters, make sure they're aware of when the election is, how they can vote. I think that's really important is that, yes, we go knock these doors and we ask, hey, are you supporting so and so? Are you not? Great. And we walk away. But we're going to be asking them how they vote as well. Are you planning to vote by mail? Planning to vote in person? Dropbox? It's important that we get that data as well because we want to know for future, okay, here's how majority of these people in this precinct are voting or in this precinct they're voting. That data is important as well. One thing about this race is we're obviously building up data for the future. And, Douglas County is going to be a big player in future elections. So we understand how important that is as well.
James, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, there's a lot of really contentious state legislator seats that are coming up next year in Douglas County that we have a chance to flip. And if we want to stop some of the most disgusting, radical legislation that we've ever seen come out of the Gold Dome in Denver, that is where we stop it. So this isn't just about defending parents and parental rights and kids in the Douglas County School Board. It's about building a future for conservatives in Colorado, and that starts by going after these precincts.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point as far as you guys are laying the groundwork and getting those connections built within Douglas County, which you can 100% leverage hopefully for future races. And, once you do it in Douglas County, you can roll it out to some of the other Democrat counties and hopefully gain some ground. I love that. And you guys mentioned that one of your goals with the school board race is to ensure that parents stay in the driver's seat. Can you expand on that a little bit and maybe highlight what the conservative board or Republican-led board has already done to keep parents in the driver's seat and why parents should vote for these Republican candidates? James, I don't know
This
if
is
you want.
you.
Oh, this is me. Sorry.
You're good.
Well, really, it's all about curriculum transparency. Parents deserve the right to know exactly what's being taught, and I think that a conservative-led school board has been doing a good job at that so far. Keeping some of the weird, sexual stuff out of libraries, and if they are in there, then the parents have a right to know, and they have a right to object to that. One of the other things that's really important to us is, not wasting money on bureaucracy or overspending on a athletic program, but that money needs to go to the classrooms and it needs to go to teachers. And that is the number one priority right now is making sure that we're not wasting any money, especially now that the feds are starting to cut some of the, education sector federally, and then the state is running under budget or over budget, excuse me. We can't afford to make mistakes in our education right now. We need to make sure that money's going where it needs to go.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
And just to touch on that, I think one of the biggest issues, and I think that, when I hear other people talk about the campaign, one of the biggest things we're seeing it nationwide, obviously, is keeping boys out of girl sports. And I think that that is the number one issue for parents right now is making sure that their daughters, they are safe in whatever athletic activity that they're taking part in. There's no boys in their locker room. And I think it's just insane to me that those on the left, those that are supporting the other slate, are okay with that. They're okay with it. And I think that that's one of the biggest drivers in this election is not only do we have to keep the conservative majority for those other reasons, but we also need to keep it because if we don't, you're going to see some very sick things getting ready to happen in that school district.
Yeah, so I'm a mom of two young girls who are in school, and that is one of the topics I'm incredibly passionate about. The Title IX updates that the Biden administration implemented were horrific, a complete overreach, and we need to maintain the sex-based protections of Title IX. What I'm hoping is that we see the Department of Education and their Civil Rights Division start to really hammer in on these investigations because we know that the Colorado High School Sports Association sanctions this. They sanction males in women's sports. If we had a school board that believes that women's sports should be female only, I think that 100% would put a lot of parents at ease. It's crazy to me that the left has garnered such control over this issue in some of these states, considering 80% of Americans don't agree that males should be in women's sports. It's just, it makes no sense. And I think,
absolutely, it's a
like you said, yeah, it's crazy. And so if you are, that's one area to absolutely highlight for these parents in Douglas County. Like, if you guys want to go with radicalism policies that majority don't support and don't make sense, vote for these Democrat candidates.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it's a 90-10 issue. It was a big issue in the 24 election. The ad that President Trump and his team put out, that they're for they, them, I'm for you, was one of the most genius ads I think we've probably ever seen in the last 10 years. And I think if the left wants to die on this sword, then okay, so be it. But we need parents, everyone, to step up and say, not anymore. No, we're not doing this anymore. And I think you're right. I really hope the Department of Education, Linda McMahon, they hold this state accountable and they say, look, we're going to withhold federal funds if you continue to sanction this. I think that that would be extremely helpful in getting some change here.
Totally
Not
agree.
just
Totally
that,
agree.
but when you have people like Jared Polis and the Colorado Department of Education that are pushing this stuff from the top down, and then you have a school board that either goes along with it or doesn't, backs down, throws their hands up and says, oh, there's nothing we can do. That's basically saying that you agree with it, whether you disagree or not. We need people that are willing to fight and stand up for what's right. And I think that the common sense slate is exactly who's going to do that.
Perfect. Do you guys have anything else you want to highlight in regards to the Douglas County School Board races? Also, like, if people want to support these candidates and join your fight, what is the best way for them to get plugged into that specific project? We'll
Yeah,
talk about your kind of statewide stuff next.
the best way to do that is to go to parentsfirstdcsd.org and sign up. There's a little link there where you hit contact and you can sign up to Canvas, Phone Bank, and also make a donation. We are accepting donations as well because money powers our ground game. And so on there, you can go and you can sign up and learn more about why we're supporting the Common Sense Slate, what we're doing, how we're doing it, where we're knocking, and who we're targeting. And we would love to have you come out. And even if you can only do an hour a week, that makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if they aren't in Douglas County, can parents still drive down there or drive up there from wherever in the state and still volunteer?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. If you're in El Paso County, Arapahoe County, Weld County, Denver County, Jeffco County, we don't care. We want you. We want you to come knock these doors because this school board race is so important.
I love that. I love that. I appreciate everything you guys are doing down there, and we're gonna hope that we have some positive outcomes in that race. Do you feel positive about it so far?
Yeah, we do. I think we're really excited. We're getting a lot of volunteers already, a lot of attention towards this. Kind of, and I think we'll get into it later. There's not a lot of external support for these candidates. We talk about statewide, but some of these local races, they don't really get this external support, whether it's financial backing, on the ground backing, whatever it might be. So I think that this is really important for these candidates, and I think that they're excited that they're getting some extra help on the ground.
Absolutely. I'm sure. We don't have very many organizations like yours in Colorado, and it's exactly what's needed. So you're filling a void there for sure. And you guys have mentioned that conservatives can't afford to rebuild from scratch every 2 years. What does a permanent infrastructure for the conservative movement look like for Colorado First Action? How do you guys plan to kind of build that? What's your maybe like 1 year goal, 2 year, 5 year? Where would you like to see this end up, and what's the journey to get there?
Well, I obviously it kind of ties into what we're doing here in Douglas County. And the biggest part of that is data retention. Every 2 years, Republican candidates have to go out and, recollect all this data. And we're going to try to retain that so that we can, when we go to these stores a year from now to say, hey, can you help us get rid of, communist Bob Marshall in Highlands Ranch? We have all this data already. We know how these people are going to vote. We know what we need to do to target these seats. And we just haven't been able to do that for the last 2 years because either the GOP or the candidates has to go out and find a new way to have a strategy with these people. We want to have a strategy, 2 years in advance. So after that, we want to target 5 state legislative seats and hold 3 Republican seats. That's not going to be enough to flip a majority in the House, but it's going to be enough to get some of the radical people off of the House committees, which is where we see a lot of the worst legislation come out of the state House. If we can do that, everything's going to start to get slowed down. Another 2 years go by, we have a majority that we can take in the Senate and in the House.
I love that. I mean,
Absolutely.
politics is a long game, so I 100% agree. And I think starting with Douglas County School Board, you're going to be able to, see it in a smaller race, still very important race. I'm not negating that, but roll those systems and processes out to the other bigger races and then eventually, statewide races.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're looking at this, like you said, it's a marathon, not a sprint. we're up against a huge, huge operation here, and you can only take one bite at the apple at a time. And so we understand that, we know that. So that's why we're starting small and we're going to go big. We're targeting these seats. These are being specifically targeted. And, I think, we touched on it, before we started here. And I think it's really important to note that a lot of these candidates, they're not going to have certain support. And we hope to be that support for them in hopes that we can build them up.
Yeah, I if you guys could target Lorena Garcia's seat, I would greatly appreciate you.
Woo!
Even though one of my favorite pastimes is trolling her on X, where she won't dare go. Do you guys, how are you going to choose the statewide seats that you're targeting or going to work with? And have you already selected those?
Yeah, so it's basically all by the numbers. Obviously this could change. There's candidates that are, there's no candidate in one seat or there's a better candidate in another seat. But a lot of these 5 seats that we're talking about, and even more than that, are within 5% margin of victory. So, it's like 2,000 votes sometimes. Sometimes it's even less than that. So if you have 5 to 10 volunteers out there, 1,000 votes is nothing. You get low propensity Republicans to turn out to vote, you can win that seat with not a whole lot of effort.
Yeah, I didn't realize that there are that many that are that close. And this is such a call to action for if you are a registered Republican in Colorado, you better be showing up to vote. You have to. I don't care if you're in a very red area either. We need to continue to show up to vote. And I understand there's concerns around our election system, but rolling over and not participating is not the answer. That's just going to hand over even more power and more ground to the Democrats. What do you guys have to add to that?
Absolutely. I understand the frustrations with our election system. I get it. I hate mail-in balloting just as much as everyone else, but the rules are the rules, and we got to learn to play the game. We can change the election law when we're there and in charge, but until then, you're going to have to learn to play within the rules. And I think that, voters need to understand that. Those that are out there challenging our election system, I get it, but really, really, my big hope is that every Republican will turn out regardless of how they feel about it, because without you, we can't win. You know, we got to win before we can start changing law. It's as simple as that.
And when you start
So,
winning, you can start getting more funding, which is also vitally
exactly.
important and has been extraordinarily lacking in Colorado.
Yeah. And think about it this way. If it is stolen, what do you really have to lose? You lose an hour of your time going to vote.
Right.
And
Yeah,
then
go
if it's
vote in
not
person.
stolen, yeah, go vote in person. You know that you have people watching the polls when you're there. There's a lot of discrepancies and there's a lot of things that are wrong with the election system, and we agree with those concerns. But when there's races like HC 43 that, the Democrat won by 1,500 votes, it's really worth it to get out there and say, hey, let's see if we can even make a difference here. And if you can't, then what are you going to do? Right? You wasted an hour going to vote. But if you can, policy is going to change and your life is going to improve.
Well, and
Absolutely.
I think that's what's so misleading about Colorado is it feels like we are a radical blue state because of the policies and the actual Democrat candidates we have. However, we look at it as far as US Congress and the House, we have 4 Republican and 4 Democrat representatives. So, and you look at some of these races and they're close. Just like you said, the local races are close. So I really don't want to see any more apathy out of Republican or conservative voters or even unaffiliates who lean right and see the insanity that's going on the Democrat side. We can start to move this state away from the embarrassing radicalism that we've seen the last few years. And I've said this and I'll continue to say it. If you are not willing to step up and get involved and at least do something, you're at the mercy of those who will. And we've been at the mercy of the Democrats who have stepped up in our state because people on the right just haven't shown up. And do you guys think that are you seeing people excited for a way to get plugged in and do something? Are you seeing strong, enrollment numbers as far as your organization and people wanting to step it up?
We are, we definitely are. And, but we're also seeing that apathy. We 100% hear that, and our message is, look, I understand it. It is horrible. I mean, the last 15 years we've lost when you really think about it. We've had some wins here and there, but the last 15 years it has not been great. So I get that apathy. And to those that want to make a difference, to those that are on Facebook, Twitter, like to say more than do more, my advice to you would be say, go knock some doors, go make some phone calls. If you do that and you make a difference, one voter you touch is one more vote for the Republican Party, one more vote for a conservative cause. I think that if the more people that do that, the better, the more you're going to see some improvement because until then, it's not going to change if you're going to sit back and complain about it but not do anything.
And then the people that do a lot of work on the ground, they get burnt out. A lot of races in a lot of areas, like I'm from Mesa County, we have the same, 20 people that are going out to door knock every year. And they get sick of it. They get bored of it. They don't want to do it if, statewide things aren't going well for them. I mean, I'm very lucky to live in Mesa County where we have pretty much a Republican supermajority in every single, county office. But statewide, we don't have that. It's very easy for people that do work hard to get burnt out, and that's why we need as many people as possible. The Democrats have an army and we have a militia. But in many cases, a militia can be stronger than an army.
I agree. I'm hopeful to see more people step up and we've seen what Scott Presler was able to accomplish in Pennsylvania. There's
Yeah.
no denying that he had a massive impact on the election, if not winning the election or being credited for a lot of the win of the election. And he was one person. He was one person who said, I'm fed up. I want to help. And he went out and knocked doors and got people to register like crazy. And so
Yeah,
to
he
think
did an
that
incredible job.
he really did. He really did. And he's continuing to now in New Jersey. If you guys, want to see what he's up to, there's a really important election in New Jersey you guys should plug into.
And I think that that's an important point. Look at New Jersey. 10 years ago, 10 plus Democrat, and now we're talking about the possibility of a Republican governor.
It's pretty
Trump
great.
only lost it by about less than 3%. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that 10 years ago?
And it just takes that one person taking the reins and getting involved. And it's just vital. And, how would you guys, we'll kind of tie it to the Douglas County, how would you guys connect the importance of those state races? The Douglas County parents, it's easier to get buy-in. They believe that's close to home. How do you continue to carry that energy from these folks into the statewide races and connect the importance of how it's not just these local, we also have to worry about state and the state legislator races?
Well, you got to think about, where does education policy come from? It comes from the state. The State Department of Education is what is determining a lot of these standards. So, I went to high school in Cherry Creek School District. They don't have valedictorians. Why? Why is the state not, having a problem with that? Why is the state not, making a difference in local education for the better? It seems like every policy that they make makes it harder on teachers and makes it more stringent on teachers that they have to follow the leftist dogma in the education system.
Agree with
The
that.
state
I
is
agree
where
with
it
that.
comes from. Yeah.
And there's some very concerning things in the sex ed curriculum in Colorado
Yeah.
right now as we speak.
Absolutely. Like James said, where does it come from? It comes from the state, and if we can make education better, what else can we make better? Can we make your life better? Can we fix your roads? Can we do all that? I
Can we
think
lower
that
your
that's
property
important.
taxes?
Exactly. Can we lower your property taxes that seem to be an issue every 6 months? And so I think that when you tie all that together and you make these voters understand, look, hey, I appreciate it. You put in your ballot for school board now. Let's talk about the next step. Let's talk about the bigger picture here. I think that that's going to be really important, especially for these low propensity Republican voters who we are specifically targeting, that have that apathy, that want to get out. And you just kind of say, hey, look what we did here. Now think about what we can do if you turn out to vote again in your statewide race.
Yeah, totally agree. And hopefully we'll see a lot more engagement. Next year, I plan to be hopefully very busy around the state, helping out wherever I can with candidates and ballot measures and all that good stuff. Because I am excited for next year's big midterm elections. Obviously, the most important next step, though, is a lot of these local elections in these school boards, city council, county commissioners. I mean, there's so many, we could go on for days. Now, let me ask you this. We'll kind of pivot here. So Colorado First Action, you guys are a grassroots organization. You're also a PAC. So let's break down kind of that stigma. I think when people hear PACs, they're like, oh God, like, ugh, ew. How can that, is that outside interference in our local elections? So how do you guys kind of break down that stigma and and hopefully connect with people who may have concerns.
Well, I'll be honest, I have that personal stigma. You think PAC, you think big, dark money, you think scandal, you think corruption. But really, the system's been established that it works that way for those corrupt individuals, but it also works for us if we're smart about how we use it. I don't necessarily agree with Citizens United and, all these things that made it easier for money to get into politics, but that's the way it is. And if we're smart about how we use money, we can make a difference for the better. Now, if we just sit back and say, oh, well, I don't want to, support a PAC because PAC equals dark money, that's not necessarily true. On the federal side for our PAC, we have a contribution limit of like $5,000. Jeff Bezos is not giving us, millions of dollars to do anything.
No,
I would say no. I would say no if he offered me money.
I think that's really important. There is no millionaire, there is no billionaire backing us. There is no, someone from an outside, no one is backing us like that. We are literally out there, yes, we're asking for a donation, and those that we're asking those for are from people's hard-earned money. We're not hiding who we are. We're very open about everything we're doing. I can understand that apathy, kind of going back to what we talked about with the election system. The rules are in place, and the rules are the rules, and you have to learn to play within the rules. And we feel like we can make the biggest difference the way that we're doing it. And we're very open about what we do. So I think that's really important for people who are listening, people who are maybe having I don't know about these guys. We're very humble to the ground, and we just want to make the biggest difference that we can for this state because we care. I think that we can have opportunities to, hey, you know what? I'm so sick of this state. I'm moving. I'm done. I don't care. Let it go to the ground, but we're not doing that. We're here working, trying to make it a better place for those that want to make it a better place.
Yeah, I mean, we saw the nationwide just reaction from Charlie Kirk's assassination.
Yeah.
And to me, what that showed was a hunger to take back our country and quit sitting around, letting the left do what they do, like you said, complaining on social media. We can do something about it. That's the beauty of this country and the Constitution. You had a kid like Charlie Kirk, no college education, start in his garage and build Turning Point to what it was. And again,
Hmm.
he's one of the other people who could be credited with winning the election. And so we need to get that energy back, and we need to harness it into these local and state elections in these radical blue states that are materially impacting state citizens negatively. All right. And the way that you stop this is you get involved, whether it's running for office or going to knock doors with your organization, or like you two launching a grassroots organization. It
Hmm.
all matters, and you can find a way to get involved that will work with your lifestyle, your time limitations, and your skill set. But it's important to do it because we don't want to continue on the trajectory we're going. I can't even imagine how unaffordable it will get to live in Colorado if we continue on the trajectory we're on.
I'm 24 years old. I can't even afford my own house, many of my own things, and I do pretty well, but it has gotten so unbelievably crazy, and nationwide, a few months ago, I was at an event, we were talking about affordability. Nationwide, the average new homeowner age is 38 years old. That's nationwide. Imagine what it is here in Colorado where things are abundantly unaffordable. It just can't be sustained, And so people like us, young guys, young girls like us that want to make a difference, it's really important that we step up because it's our future. It's our future that we're fighting for.
James, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 19. I'm 19 years old, and I'm a university student. I live in a house with four guys. My rent is like almost $3,000 in Grand Junction. This isn't Boulder. This isn't, downtown Denver. This is Grand Junction. There's no reason that rent should be that high for, a house for four people to live in. It's ridiculous. And it's partly because, the state is making it harder for people that want to rent out their properties. That's one of the big issues that we have, but it goes beyond that. And there's so many things that play with affordability, and it's downright impossible to get a start if you're not, coming from a wealthy background.
I could go on for days about the issues we have. I just want people to understand we are like the sixth most regulated state. And if you don't think those regulations impact the cost of things here, 100%, because you're creating barriers of entry for these builders, for businesses, for everyone to come in and bring competition to bring prices down. And
We
that's,
are
I mean, look at
ranked,
gas.
yeah. We
Yeah,
we are
look at
ranked one of the
gasoline.
worst states to do business in. One of the worst. And it didn't used to be that way. Did not used to be that way. We went from top 10 down to, lower 48,
it's been such
no
a
pun
sad,
intended.
it's been such a sad trajectory and last 8 years, but there is hope. And so I am super grateful for you two stepping up and creating Colorado First Action. What I want to do before we close this out, if you guys want to kind of make your pitch to people as to why they should volunteer with your organization, how they can step up, I will also put all of your guys' socials and links in the show notes so people can access you that way. But go ahead and tell people how and why they should get involved with Colorado First.
Yeah, so this is a grassroots organization. We're starting from the ground up here. We're going after seats that we know we can win. And without that, there is no future in Colorado. We're going to end up exactly like California, exactly like Oregon. That's not a state that I want to live in. I want to live in Colorado. And I believe that everybody out there that's listening to this show agrees with that. This is our home. It's been my home since I was born. I was born here in Grand Junction. I've lived here my entire life. I don't want to see this state go down the drain for Gen Z. I don't want to see this state be too, unaffordable for people that are 65. It's getting impossible for everybody in the state of Colorado to want to stay here. And that frustration is heard by us, and we have an opportunity to strike back on that. There's been an immense amount of momentum for conservatives nationwide, and there's no infrastructure to do it in Colorado, and that's exactly where we come in. We're going to build that up from the ground up with your help.
Absolutely. And, I just want to make the pitch to those Republicans that feel disenfranchised, feel very fed up with everything going on, whether that's within the state party or with whatever's going on in the state. We're not playing politics here. We're just here to win. We're here to try to make your life better in the state of Colorado. And like James said, I don't want to see it become California. I don't want to see it become like Oregon, Seattle, Washington, all those places. We're here to fight for you. And we want to see this state become better. We want to make a change, and we hope that you'll join us.
Thank you guys so much. First of all, for being my first interview on the Liberty Legion podcast. I appreciate you.
That's pretty
If you
cool.
guys want to learn more about Colorado First Action, go to coloradofirstaction.org and support these young men. Even if you can just donate, that goes a long way. Trust me, anything helps. And if you're new to Liberty Legion podcast, please make sure to subscribe, like, and share, and we will catch you on the next episode.